I'm Mark Fiske, and you're listening to Clear the Air. Hi, I'm Mark Fiske with Sonic Spotlight Productions, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Clear the Air. So, to give you some more of my background, I was born in October 1974 in Northwest Ohio with an internal birth defect that resulted in an extended stay in what was probably the closest thing to what we're calling a NICU now. Since you're listening to me right now, clearly I pulled through, but in one of my pediatric appointments, I was super pale because I was losing a lot of blood, and my pediatrician wrote FLK on my chart, which he explained meant funny looking kid. Obviously, that all happened too early for me to remember it, but I suppose that was my first experience with bullying, which I became reacquainted with throughout junior high and high school, mostly because I had the nerve to have red hair. But I have to tell you that my most disappointing experience with bullying came after I was hired as a high school band director, and my students experienced it usually at the hands of coaches or school administrators who never quite managed to mature past their band kids or geeks phase. In that context, my earlier experiences with bullying might have been the universe's way to prepare me to defend my students in music programs in any of the instances that they faced it. So in some strange way, as the resident expert in bullying, it was an asset in those situations. It's funny how those things work out sometimes. In school, I played violin, trumpet, and tennis, and recreationally, I enjoyed playing tennis about as much as I enjoyed playing music. And so I probably predictably ended up on the high school tennis team, but unfortunately, that was my first encounter with actual textbook nepotism, which, like you've already heard me say, is really just bullying, usually by adults and usually based on that person's perception of, and really their value of your status rather than anything else on the list of 1 million things that kids are usually helpless to change. And as far as my introduction to nepotism goes, I really didn't like that. Now, you might be wondering, yeah, but how did he know it was nepotism? And I know it was nepotism because as I was expressing frustration over something that happened in an event, I was told by a leader of this group, who I think was so appalled at the nerve that I had to bring this up to him, that he crossed a bit of a line. And he actually said, "It's because your parents aren't teachers and don't run any companies or hold any offices." So, there you go. Considering all that, it might not surprise you that I'm naturally an introvert. Big time. Like, I don't easily trust people, and trust is something for me that if it ever gets to that point, it's been earned many times over. That's going to be news. If you were one of my students, and uh, if you're listening and you're from that group of people, they may be a little bit shocked right now. In the face of all those types of setbacks, and after getting advice from people that I did trust, I eventually decided that it was important to offer to help anyone that I thought might be facing something similar. Now, I'm not pretending to be a saint or that there haven't been times that I had a chip on my shoulder when I shouldn't have or maybe went too far, because that's happened, and in those situations I have regrets and wish things had gone differently just like most people do. Anyway, as a senior in high school, I was surrounded by people asking, "You're going to college to major in music, right?" And honestly, I had never considered that at that point. I had every intention of going into the Air Force or ROTC and studying aerospace engineering. But when I got to college, I was told I didn't have the math experience and I shouldn't have entered engineering, and nobody was offering any advice on how to get back on track with that. So then, as the story goes, I did go to a different college. It was in my hometown, and I majored in music education. Now, while that was something that I wanted to do, I was not prepared for how absolutely exhausting it was going to be to spend 21 years doing something that was so unnatural for me to do. But I did it for that long because I think I got good at it. And then I think at some point it turned into something people needed me to do. The bottom line is that it was usually fun, but it was never easy. And as you've no doubt have noticed me using the past tense, I'll close this episode by saying that burnout is very real, especially in an environment like the one I was working in. We'll pick we'll pick it up from there in the next episode of Clear the Air. Thank you again for listening and for your support.